After her husband's funeral, Linda finds a letter in their attic addressed to a woman she's never heard of. What she uncovers leads her down a road filled with grief, truth, and ultimately choice. Linda Jennings had been married to Walter for 37 years. Their house, tucked on the edge of a wooded hill in northern Vermont, had seen every stage of their love, from the first uncertain steps of young marriage to the quiet, comfortable rituals of retirement. Walter passed in early October. Heart failure, the doctor said, as if hearts were meant to last forever. The funeral was small. Their children came, stood beside her, and then left. Grief, Linda discovered, was lonelier when you were older. People assumed you were used to losing things by then. 1 week after the funeral, Linda climbed to the attic. She hadn't been up there in years. Cobwebs clung to every beam, and dust coated the trunks like powdered sugar. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, maybe something to feel close to him again, something that smelled like his flannel or sounded like his laugh. Instead, she found a box labeled Taxes 1992. Inside, tucked beneath old envelopes and a yellowed calculator tape, was a letter. The envelope was addressed in Walter's handwriting, but not to her. To Marion, 215 Hawthorne Lane, Bennington. The name rang no bell. The address meant nothing, but the date on the letter was recent, just 3 months before his death. Linda hesitated, then opened it. Marion, I don't know how much longer I'll have. I've tried to do the right thing. I've tried to bury the past, but it keeps rising. You once asked if I ever told her about us. I didn't. I couldn't. I loved you. I still do in some quiet part of myself. But I chose her. I stayed. I had to. Forgive me. Linda read it twice, then again. Her hands trembled. The attic grew colder, but she couldn't move. The name, the tone, the regret. It all felt like a betrayal wrapped in politeness. She spent the next few days trying to pretend it hadn't happened, but every time she looked at his photo, a question echoed in her chest. Who was Marion? On the 4th day, she drove to Bennington. 215. Hawthorne Lane was a small yellow house with a broken wind chime on the porch. A woman answered the door, late 60s, short grey hair, eyes that instantly recognized Linda. You're her, Marion said softly, and you're... Marion. They stared at each other, two widows of the same man. Come in, Marion said, stepping aside. The inside of the house was quiet, filled with books and wind chimes. Marion poured tea. They sat across from each other, the letter between them. I met him in 1986, Marion said. He was on a work trip. I was... lonely. We never meant for it to last, but it did. Linda listened. I asked him to leave her, Marion continued. He said no. Said he couldn't break your heart. Linda swallowed hard. Why the letter? He said he needed to put it to rest before he died. I told him I didn't need it. But he wrote it anyway. Silence again. He said he loved you, Marion added, even while he loved me. Linda let that sit. Driving home, Linda didn't cry. The betrayal was real, yes. But so was the love. So was the life they had. Maybe it hadn't been whole, but it had been honest in its own imperfect way. A week later, she returned to the attic and placed the letter in a new envelope. She addressed it to herself, tucked it back into the box, and let it be. Some stories aren't tidy, some loves aren't clean, but in the mess there can still be meaning. The photograph behind the clock. For 34 years, Margaret thought she knew everything about her husband, until she found an old photograph tucked behind the mantel clock, and a face she didn't recognize. Margaret and Tom lived in a quiet brick house at the edge of Maple Creek. 34 years of marriage had softened their edges. She no longer minded his snoring, and he stopped complaining about her crossword obsession. They had grown into each other's silences. Every evening they drank tea while the news played in the background. Margaret did the dishes, Tom folded the paper. Life had settled into a rhythm, safe, familiar, until Tuesday. She was dusting the mantelpiece when she noticed the clock had stopped. Curious, she lifted it to check the battery. That's when a small yellowing photograph fell out from behind. It was old, the edges curled, the colors faded. A woman with dark eyes sitting on a picnic blanket. Next to her was Tom, younger. smiling in a way Margaret hadn't seen in decades. She stared at it for a long time, then quietly placed it back. That evening, Tom didn't notice her silence, or the way she stirred her tea too long. She didn't ask. Not yet. But the photo haunted her. 2 days later, when Tom went to play cards at the senior centre, Margaret drove to the local library. She looked up newspaper archives from the 1980s. It took 3 hours, but she found her. Local teacher dies in river accident. Clara Hughes, 28. The woman in the photo. She didn't confront Tom, not right away. Instead, she began watching him differently. The way he looked out the kitchen window, the times he stood still in the hallway, like remembering something. On Sunday, she laid the photo on the table. Tom froze. "I found this," she said. He sat down slowly, looked at it like it hurt. "That's Clara," he whispered. "She was my first love. We were engaged. She died the summer before I met you." Margaret nodded. "You never told me." "I couldn't," he said. "Some pain. It carves too deep. I buried it so I could move forward." She felt the sting of it, not jealousy, but the weight of a ghost she never knew was in their home. Later that night, they sat by the window. "I loved her," he said, "but I chose you, every single day since." Margaret reached for his hand. "We all carry someone, Tom, but I'm glad you carried me too. Life leaves spaces. Not every silence is a betrayal. Sometimes it's a scar. And some love stories are layered, not lost.